Chapter 346. I don't know. When Yudhir answered honestly, Kishir raised his head and smiled. The one who first made a stove capable of igniting and burning magic stones lived near the mine of magic stones. Up until then, the low quality magic stones, which were not worth selling, were all buried in the ground. But he discovered that the poor were picking up this trash to use in the stove instead of firewood. Even though the magic stones were of low grade, they still contained a faint magic power. When the magic stones were put in the stove, the flames didn't burn as hot as when wood used to, but they retained their warmth for a much longer time. Though the heat was not enough for cooking, it had some utility for the poor. The practicing mage who found a way to make better use of the low grade magic stones that was treated as trash sought out a craftsman and made the first magic stone stuff. However, his master and others in the world thought it was a highly dangerous and useless endeavor. Those who were accustomed to burning wood couldn't understand the need for a magic stone stuff. The creator was expelled from the Mages Association but continued to make and sell the stuffs. What has become of it now? Dot dot dot. Unless it's an area that pathologically loves tradition like the West, or where it's difficult to obtain magic stones for stuffs, most use magic stone stuffs. Nobody finds it strange anymore. Yudhir thought of the mountain cabin where he had lived before joining the cavalry. Even that crumbling house had a magic stone stove. Of course, it was incomparably small and worn compared to the beautiful stove in Kishir's office, but it was sufficient to keep the house warm enough to avoid freezing to death in the winter. I like that stove. I am very fond of how something once deemed useless became a necessity in the world, thanks to those who believed in its value and pressed on. So, that's why you have a stove even in the middle of the office? Exactly. Wherever I stay, whether it's my bedroom or the Paleta castle. Kishir, who replied lightly, flicked the cloak that had been draped over his chair. The pins and buttons affixed to the shoulder of his garment clearly bore the emblem of the Duke of Paleta. And that's why I included a flame when I had decided an emblem to use as the Duke of Paleta. I never knew you liked it that much. Even in his previous life, whenever Yudhir thought of Kishir, an image of a burning stove always accompanied him. However, he didn't realize that even the flame used in the Duke of Paleta's emblem had such meaning. The newfound fact was both surprising and intriguing. On the first day of forming the cavalry, I wished for it to be like the magic stone stove, something that may seem useless or weak at first, but will eventually become an essential existence that recognized. That's what I mean. Dot dot dot. When I heard the words of Dane's firstborn earlier, it suddenly reminded me of that day. Yudhir looked at Kishir's red eyes, seemingly captivated, as they were focused on the unlit wall stove. Maybe not now, but someday, the existence of the Awakeners will be recognized as naturally as mages, if not more. But that day will never be given without effort. And Kishir made the first step of a foundation that could strive for that day with his own hands. I will make today's event another big step towards that day with you. Dot dot dot. You will be with me, of course, won't you? The heart pounded, large and incredibly fast. Yudhir Ale had never felt a positive emotion whenever he thought about the real future. But whenever Kishir spoke about the future, he always felt as if his heart would burst. The future he envisioned was as broad and vast as the throat can gulp, and it was beautiful. Toward the man who dreamed of the future that Udir El could not paint even if he died, he nodded with a painful and clear conviction. Yes. Good. Kishir smiled joyfully. He reached out and pulled Udir to him. Led by the unhesitant pull that overcame the appropriate distance that the commander and assistant should maintain, he soon found himself sitting on Kishir's lap. The man, raising his hand, clad in a black glove, silently and yet overly long pressed his lips, breathed out a sweet breath, and muttered, "You probably don't know how much joy I get from that answer. Dot dot dot." The sticky and headache inducing dream completely vanished at that moment. Udir, looking down at his hand grasped by Kishir, impulsively but cautiously bent down and pressed his lips to the white back of the hand. "You probably don't know either." The feelings Udir felt every time he informed him that his previous life was different and that it would change in the future, and his thoughts, he wouldn't know, and he wished he wouldn't know in the future. Feelings that could not be uttered melted and disappeared between his lips, and Udir raised his eyes to meet the slightly surprised red eyes. No more conversation was needed. The moment he closed his eyes again, strength entered the tightly grasped hand, and a warm heat overlapped on his lips. "Commander?" "Hmm?" After a long kiss that ended with a sigh, Udir opened his eyes and called him softly. "Are you still deliberately controlling the power below?" Dot dot dot. Instead of an answer, the smile turned a bit awkward. "Why do you keep doing that? If I don't, wouldn't it become inconvenient for us both? Having a nightmare just by restoring power once is enough. There is no need to do it twice." "That's not because of you, Commander. Anyway, it's not just a one-time or two-time problem." Udir looked down at his legs supported under the raised knees and opened his mouth with difficulty. "I thought this last time too, but it can't be good for your body, can it? You go to bed much later than me and wake up early, and constantly suppressing your power is going to be too burdensome, I think. Dot dot dot. Just a moment. Is it because of me that you're not sleeping properly?" Thinking about it, Kishir was a person who was good at hiding his condition with an indifferent face. Suddenly, the back of his head felt a little chilly as he thought that his unusually late bedtime and early waking might be because of that reason. "I naturally need little sleep, but I'm glad you worry about me like that. But I would like you to know that I worry about you just as much." "Who's worrying about whom when your eyes and strength haven't fully recovered yet?" With one word, the man who made Udir close his mouth kissed him lightly on the forehead, smiling. Then he kissed his eyes and his cheeks. It was a pleasant kiss, imbued not with desire but a pleasant warmth. "Okay, let's do this. Once this eye heals completely, I promise not to suppress it forcefully. As for sleep, if it bothers you that much, shall we sleep at the same time starting tonight?" Still dissatisfied, there was no denying that his eye had not healed, so there was nothing to be said. Udir silently nodded his head. Kishir smiled and kissed him deeply on the eyelid. That night, they lay side by side in the large bed, facing each other. Although they felt as if they were doing something they should not have been doing so casually, neither of them wanted to avoid it. Lying next to each other and looking into each other's eyes felt very strange. Kishir was incredibly beautiful, even with his hair and face slightly pressed against the pillow. Suddenly, Yudir recalled the story of the empress who had asked to place her coffin facing the first emperors. How might Kishir, who had once said she understood the sentiment behind that request, be feeling now? What are you thinking so hard about? It's as if you're going to bore a hole into my face. I was thinking about something I forgot to tell you and how I should say it. Rather than revealing his true thoughts, he changed the subject. When Kishir asked what it was, Yiddir explained that Baron Wilhelm had come to relay the Duke of Dane's interest. Kishir frowned at this news. As expected, he came as soon as I left you alone. That man is really brazen. Yes, everything he said was quite obvious. So, what did you say? I told him to contact the commander first if he wants to get in touch with me. You did well. Kishir let out a soft laugh. Seeing that laugh while lying face to face felt oddly unfamiliar. Are you uncomfortable with me here? I'm not uncomfortable. Really? Really? All right. Kishir smiled and reached out to stroke Yiddir's hair. The ticklish sensation made his bangs messy. Yiddir left him to play with his hair as he pleased. Have you ever slept like this with anyone before? He was about to say no, but a faint memory from his distant childhood surfaced. I think I did when I was a child, sleeping with my grandfather. That's right. You said you lived with your grandfather. Kishir seemed to recall the family details that had been on Yudh's application. You must have been quite pampered growing up. I don't know about being pampered. He was just normal. If I misbehaved, I was scolded, and we had occasional quarrels. But that's how we lived. The memories of living with his grandfather were now mostly lost, buried under the many storms of his previous life. However, a 20-year-old man should still remain many memories of his grandfather. So he tried his best to recall and respond. Although the answer wasn't particularly amusing, Kishir couldn't seem to stop smiling with a peculiar expression. Why are you smiling so much? Do you know, it's the first time you have talked about yourself like this.